All right, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here, both in the room as well as online. My name is Carlos Diaz. I'm the founding director of the Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom. We were established by the legislature and the governor of Florida just a couple of years ago to become a world-class, independent, nonpartisan think tank that aims to inform, to influence, and to inspire current and future leaders to develop and implement innovative, meaningful, and effective policies to advance economic and individual freedom and human prosperity. Today, we are so thrilled to welcome to the center our new cohort of senior leadership fellows. This is the 5th cohort. As many of you know, this program brings distinguished public servants, public leaders who have worked at the highest levels of government and promoted, when they were in office, creative and innovative public policies that strengthen the free enterprise system and enhance individual freedom and human prosperity in their countries. These fellows reside at FIU. They come to FIU for the semester, and they teach not-for-credit study groups, 8 sessions apiece. The sessions are typically an hour and a half, followed or preceded by an hour and a half of office hours, where they interact with our students. When they talk about a number of topics, they're going to tell us what they're going to be teaching over the next couple of months. And we always emphasize not just what worked for them, but what didn't work. What were the mistakes they made? Because we can often learn a lot more from our mistakes than from our successes. So these are really practical. They're grounded in their experience. And from the 4 previous cohorts, we've heard a tremendous amount of good comments about how these fellows gave them access and how they inspired them to become public servants. We live in a time in which politicians have a bad rep, and we hear all the negativity around public service. So part of the program here, or part of the idea, is to show that public service is incredibly noble, and that there's a lot of good that can come out from their work of individuals just like them. So that's the program. I see it as the crown jewel of our educational efforts. We do a number of things. We do public events, we do research, but the educational piece, really the crown jewel, is this program that gives our students, both undergraduate and graduate, direct and unfettered access to these individuals in candid, off-the-record conversations like the ones that they're about to begin. One of them began yesterday, and the other 3 begin this week. So what I want to do is just briefly introduce them to you. Very, very briefly. We can spend the whole hour talking about all their many accomplishments. I won't do that. I'll briefly tell you who they are. And then I'm going to ask them to perhaps talk for a couple of minutes, which is going to be hard, I know, about anything else they want to talk about themselves. I'm going to ask them 1 or 2 questions about their specific countries, their areas of expertise. And then I'm going to ask them a concluding question about their study groups. I want students to get a flavor for what they're going to be teaching over the next few weeks, the next 8 weeks, and so sort of do a plug for their study groups. You can sign up for their study groups by going online, freedom.fiu.edu. If you go to students, you'll see the sign-up sheets for each of their study groups. We limit them so that they're an intimate experience. We don't want to have more than a dozen people in these settings, because we want them to get to know the students, and we want the students to get to know them and hang out with them and take advantage of this opportunity. And I want to emphasize the take advantage part, because this really is unique. We had a dinner last night to welcome them, and at all our events we have students, and there were a number of students who were there, and I told them what I'm going to tell you now. Some of the students are here, and that this is really not normal. We have a program that in its 5th iteration now has brought in a number of amazing public servants. We've had in 5 cohorts, we've had 7 presidents, 7 former presidents, 2 vice presidents, 2 members of the US Congress, 3 ambassadors, 3 cabinet ministers. So it seems normal, right, for our students to be hanging out with these people, but it's really not normal. I don't know any other university in the country, perhaps in the world, that has this level of access. The program is not, I didn't create it from scratch. There's other universities that have similar programs. Harvard has one, Yale has one, the University of Chicago has one, Georgetown has one. But if you look at the fellows that they have, no offense to these people, they're not at the same level. They occasionally have a former president or an ambassador. Most of them are, the staffer or the campaign manager of the failed campaign that got 2% of the vote. Or very interesting people. But if you look at the quality and the caliber of our fellows, it's really second to none. And so to our students, please take advantage of the opportunity. Take advantage of the opportunity to take their study groups, to go to lunch with them, to go to office hours with them. I know that might be intimidating to go to office hours with the president, a former president of a country. Don't look at it that way. Look at it as a great learning opportunity that you cannot have anywhere else in any other university in the country and perhaps in the world. We had, a week ago, we had 4 events with 4 sitting presidents. We welcomed, for a fireside chat, the current president of the Republic of Paraguay, the president of Ecuador, the prime minister of Belize, and the president of the Dominican Republic, in settings just like this one, about 60 people, and the dinners were even smaller, and we had an opportunity to interact with them, and no other institution in New York, with the exception of the UN, where they all went, had this level of programming and this level of access. And so again, a word to our students, take advantage of them. They're here for you. They're here so that you can learn from them. Again, there are successes, and there are many, and there are mistakes. There were many as well. Shouldn't be saying this, but yeah, these are real human beings, people who have a lot to share, so take advantage of the opportunity and seek them out because they're here for you. Let me briefly introduce you to the fellows, and then I'm going to hand it over to them. I'll begin with His Excellency Miomir Žužul, who's an accomplished diplomat, politician, and public servant from Croatia. We're very excited to have him for many reasons, but one of them is that most of our fellows so far have been from Latin America and the US. And in the previous semester, we expanded to include our first fellow from Central Asia, the former president of the Parliament of Afghanistan, and now we have our first European fellow, the first of hopefully many. The ambassador served as Minister of Foreign Affairs of Croatia and as a member of the Croatian Parliament. He was also ambassador of Croatia to the United States, to the Organization of American States, to Mexico, and to the United Nations, in Geneva. He was appointed as the first national security advisor in Croatia and served as special envoy to the president of Croatia for the peace talks between 1994 and 1999. In that role, he led negotiations with the international community and was a member of the Croatian negotiating team to the Dayton Peace Accords. He currently provides strategic counsel to clients on a wide range of foreign policy issues, including global political and economic matters, NATO and European Union activities, and issues at the intersection of business and government. He works with major clients across Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. He has extensive experience in academia as well. In 2006, the ambassador founded the first private university in Croatia, TIU Libertas, established under the auspices of the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. He has lectured at some of the most prestigious universities around the world, so we're really, really honored that we can now add FIU to that list of universities. I should also say that he's a prolific author. He holds a PhD in social psychology with a particular focus on aggressive behavior, which I'm sure came in handy during your time in foreign policy. And he began his career as a professor of psychology at the University of Zagreb. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We have the Honorable Robin Bernstein, who's an amazing businesswoman and diplomat from the United States of America. She served as the U.S. Ambassador to the Dominican Republic from 2018 until 2021. She formerly served at the U.S. She also formerly served at the U.S. Department of Commerce and served on the presidential transition team of President Jimmy Carter. Her work as an ambassador earned her many accolades, most notably the Orden de Duarte from the President of the Dominican Republic, who gave her that award in 2021, right before she left. For more than 2 decades, she has served as president of Richard S. Bernstein and Associates and vice president and director of Risborg, both of West Palm Beach. The ambassador is highly skilled at crafting and executing business plans, shaping strategic directions, selecting, motivating, and working with and leading local, national, and international teams, communicating with the media, and formulating creative solutions to very, very complex problems. Her vast array of contacts in the areas of international business, politics, government, and the nonprofit sector have enabled her to find solutions for many diverse issues. She has served, and still served, on many prestigious boards and councils, and has earned numerous awards for her dedication, service, and commitment. Ambassador Bernstein earned a double BA in Language Area Studies and International Studies from the American University School of International Service, as well as an MBA from George Washington University, both in Washington, D.C. His Excellency, President Juan Guaidó, served as interim president of Venezuela from 2019 until 2023, just a few months ago. And before that, he was president of the National Assembly. An internationally recognized leader, he has transcended borders by demonstrating an unwavering commitment to democracy and freedom, not only in Venezuela, but around the world as well. Through the many challenges he has faced, he has demonstrated his ability to lead and coordinate actions in the midst of adversity, demonstrating an outstanding capacity to mobilize support nationally and internationally. His role at the helm of the caretaker government in Venezuela was a bold step that sought to restore democracy and stability, not only demonstrated his commitment to governance, but also to justice. During his mandate, he strove to rebuild the country's institutions, the crumbling institutions, I should say, and preserve democratic values, facing both internal and great external challenges with great determination. He's a co-founder of the Voluntad Popular political party and a co-author of several fundamental laws in Venezuela. His efforts have transcended national borders and earned him a place in the international community as part of the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders. He has a degree in industrial engineering, and we're really honored to have him as part of our fellowship program. His Excellency President Jamil Mahuad served as President of the Republic of Ecuador from 1998 until 2000, and before that, for 6 years, he was mayor of the capital city of Quito. President Mahuad was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1999 for negotiating and signing the definitive peace treaty with Peru. And I'm going to quote somebody that I usually don't quote, but this is a really good quote, and it's worth it, President Clinton, who said, quote President Clinton, he earned this award because he resolved the last and oldest source of international armed conflict in the hemisphere. He's also responsible for dollarizing the US economy. In Ecuador, the official currency is the dollar, thanks to President Mahuad. This has become a very timely issue because other countries in the region are thinking about dollarizing. So he's been in the news lately giving comments about why a country should or should not dollarize. He has been recognized around the world as well for his efforts in protecting the tropical rainforest in Ecuador. President Mahuad has been co-director of the project on the prevention of global violence, which was part of the Harvard Institute of Global Health under the Office of the President of the University, co-founder and senior advisor to the Harvard International Negotiation Program at Harvard Law School, where he still serves, and a board member of the Abraham Path Initiative, among many other prestigious organizations. When he's not at FIU, President Mahuad is still teaching leadership and negotiation as part of the executive education program at the Harvard Kennedy School, where I met him 22 years ago for the first time, and is a postdoc fellow on the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School. He has also lectured at many world-renowned universities around the world, and again, we're deeply honored that we can add FIU to that list of prestigious universities. He is a terrific author, and 2 years ago, he published a book called Así Dolarizamos al Ecuador, which was the best-selling book in Ecuador in 2021. So as you can see, we have a truly amazing, amazing group. I just scratched the surface of all the accomplishments that these individuals have individually and collectively. As I said, this is not normal, so please, please take advantage of it. I'll ask them a few questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to you so you can ask any questions you like. I'll begin with Ambassador Žužul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and I am indeed very honored to be here today and to be part of this program, and I can just echo what we heard into introduction. I participated in many different universities around the world as a full-time teacher, as an occasionally teacher, but indeed I never had experience or privilege to be in a group like here and learning that this is already fifth time. I mean, it speaks volume. Maybe you are not, you cannot fully appreciate it, but trust me, as some of people around here, I was also teaching at Harvard, at Princeton, you know, in London Diplomatic Academy, institutions that are known that they are doing that, and that in theory can invite everybody in theory. In reality, that not everybody, but those people who have something to say are really here, and that is thanks to energy and charisma of Carlos. So thank you very much. I only hope that we will be able to satisfy the nicely way how we were introduced. Do you want me to tell a little bit about?
Sure. Anything else about you that I haven't mentioned? And if you don't mind, sort of make a plug for what you'll be teaching.
Okay, thank you. And as group of people here, we are going in between academia, politics, diplomacy, and once I was asked to compare the three professions that I was in. And in that moment, it came to my mind something that I really like. I don't know if you will like it. I said, typically professor is somebody who speaks about the things that she or her or he, that they know about, or that they are expert. Politicians is the person who speaks about the things that probably he or she doesn't know anything, but must to talk about it. And diplomats is the person who doesn't talk even about the things that he or she knows very well. There is something into that. So what I will be trying to exchange the views rather than teaching, it's diplomacy, because I dare to say that I've been living diplomacy for the last 30 plus years. And that subject is, or diplomacy overall, is for me, in a way, biggest disappointment and the biggest motivation. Why disappointment? Because when we look, as a psychologist, I would like to say and to try to prove that we as human beings, that we don't need to go into wars or serious fightings. As a person, as an individual who passed the war, who was witnessing the war, I wonder, is that true? I hope that it is true, but I wonder, is it true? But what I do know, there is only one thing, one human activities, one civilizational activities which is opposite to the war, and that is diplomacy. So it's either or. If you are fighting, or you have diplomatic solution. That diplomatic solution can have a huge number of the options. But there is one prerequisite for diplomacy, always, and that is to talk. And while war, typically, we do not talk. So why that is my disappointment? When we look into history of civilization, not the history of Europe, not the history of Latin America, not the history of this beautiful country, the war exists as long as we exist as a organized human societies, unfortunately, but that is the fact. But diplomacy is as old as that. So diplomacy basically happened simultaneously with the war. Eventually, all wars in the history were stopped. And the stop of the war was some diplomatic solution, even if one side was a loser and one side a winner. However, when we look development of the civilization, when we look where were people 2,000 years, 100 years, 50 years ago in fighting the wars, what were their means, mechanisms, how they were fighting the difference is huge, enormous. They were throwing the stones, the rocks, in the Bible times, and now they have the most sophisticated airplanes that nobody can see, the drones that they can be controlled from here and killing thousands of the people. So enormous. Is that improvement of civilization or not? I don't know. It is the technical progress of the civilization. Now when we look what is on the other side, diplomacy, what do we have now that we didn't have 2,000 years ago? We have ties. And we have computers that occasionally we use. Preferably, I don't use it because I believe in diplomacy face-to-face. So we have just human actions and human possibility to convince the other side, whoever is the other side, that peace is better than the war. So that is in a way, when you look what we are spending as civilization, what we are spending, all diplomatic actions, all peace operations, even including that extremely expensive bureaucracy on a East River in New York, United Nations, but that is still fraction of what any country in the world is spending for defense, for the arms. Diplomacy is also defense. I would dare to argue sometimes way more powerful defense. Why I do believe that? Because I passed through my own life, I passed those stages, from the war to diplomacy to diplomatic solution. And what is ideal? I mean, diplomacy cannot provide ideal solution. It's almost always compromise. But war is never ideal solution, not even when it is without too many casualties, although that is a rare occasion. So when I so that is indeed my disappointment. But from that also it comes the motivation. If I have opportunity like I have it here, I gladly talk about diplomacy from all possible aspects, for negative, for positive, hoping that, by motivating some people to think about that, to work on that, by explaining them that, by the way, that is good side. Diplomacy is very nice profession. But it is not worth to go into that profession if we forget what is the core of diplomacy. The core of diplomacy is come to the peace and not to have nice diplomatic receptions as you can have now if you are right now in New York. So that is my motivation. I hope that I will be able to motivate some of you to continue or to consider to go to that path. And once again, I cannot say enough how privileged I feel to be this day on this table. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to go from one ambassador to another ambassador, but before that, I wonder if we can get some more chairs. It looks like we have some people who, the response has been terrific, and if we can get a few more chairs so that everybody can sit down. It's a great turnout. So that was the easy question. We'll get to the hard questions about politics and policy after, but Ambassador?
Thank you, Carlos. My name is Bernstein. I'm honored to be here today in such distinguished company. It is funny that I chose a necklace from Croatia, not knowing I was going to be His Excellency from Croatia, Juan Guaidó. When I was in the Dominican Republic, we were very, very supportive of what he had. I cannot wait to attend some of your classes. And of course, this is the first time to meet President Mahuad from Ecuador. But I'm very honored to share this platform today. And thank you again, Carlos, for chasing me down and asking me to do this. I live in Palm Beach, Florida, and my class is really, I've called it a class on leadership and diplomacy and how the two really do interact, because today's leaders really need to be skilled diplomats and today's diplomats need to lead. So this course, I think, is ideal for young students that are considering a career either as a diplomat or... I believe that we are all able to be leaders. Leadership is inside of all of us, and I want to share with you some of the tools I think that you will need that will carry you into life. I'm very privileged that I leaned on some of my ambassador friends and former president friends and some new friends to teach this class. The first is leading. My class will be on really leading with your heart, my journey to becoming Madam Ambassador, and the skills that I used from a very young child wanting to be a diplomat from as long as I can remember. It took me 65 years to get there, but I got there. So never give up. The second session is Words Do Matter, and how we communicate today in a world of Instagram and Facebook and AI. Words matter then from when we all were becoming diplomats. Your world is vastly different from the world that we grew up in, but some of the things that we have, the incoming president of the Florida Bar, Roland Sanchez Medina, who will be speaking to us about words matter and how to effectively communicate in today's world. We also have Ambassador Jean Maines, who was Ambassador to El Salvador, and Ambassador Sharon Day, U.S. Ambassador to Costa Rica, giving us a little view from Central America and how they successfully smashed through the glass ceiling. This will be particularly interesting, I think, to many of your women students, how to not take no for an answer and what these women did to inspire me. And I got a particularly good book on that one, the great book of Badass Women, 15 Fearless and Inspirational Women That Changed History. And I think that will be very exciting to you guys as well when you're dealing with women like me.
And at one point, the title of your study group was going to be Badass Women in Leadership, but we decided to
yeah, because you took my biggest badass woman, who was General Sherman, Laura Sherman, but she will be speaking here for FIU, so I hope you will catch her as well. I will be teaching a class on what's your game plan. what is your individual game plan? And I hope to be able to mentor each one of you as we discuss what your game plan is and how I can help you get there. We also have President Leonel Fernandez, who was a former president of the Dominican Republic, who has an incredible library of 400,000 books. He also has partnered, I believe, with FIU on the strategic plan. He wrote a book for Florida and the Dominican Republic. He's a particularly inspirational person to me, highly articulate, and just a wonderful person. I do hope you will be able to catch his class. Then the next ambassador I have is Ambassador Ron Johnson. He was also U.S. Ambassador to El Salvador. But what's most interesting about his class is he's also a career CIA agent. And he will be speaking about motivating and collaborating with diverse teams in high-risk, high-gain environments. And he draws a lot of his inspiration from the leadership secrets of Colin Powell. And then I have Ambassador V. Manuel Rocha, who was U.S. Ambassador to Bolivia. I don't know if you've ever met Ambassador, but he'll give us some thoughts. He's a career ambassador. What is it like to be a career Foreign Service agent? And one of the books I recommend is Life Inside a U.S. Embassy, How to Get That Diplomatic Career of Yours Started. Unless you take the political route, and then that's what I did. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with Ambassador Ned Siegel, who was U.S. Ambassador to the Bahamas, bringing it home here to the Caribbean. And he's going to be speaking about doing good in a deeply divided world. Today's world the vitriol is just so incredible to me. I've served 2 presidents, a Democrat and a Republican, and I have always tried to, as a diplomat, to see both sides. And I hope that we will be able to bring up to you what it's like to do good in today's divided world. Thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting you all.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. And speaking of badass women and women who have achieved great accomplishments, we're deeply, deeply honored to have our provost, Elizabeth Behar, here with us. Thank you. You can teach your own class about women in leadership, so we're grateful for your support and your presence here. Now I'm going to hand it over to President Guaidó. And feel free to do it in English, in Spanish, however you want.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm going to be switching between Spanish and English. I'm deeply honored to be here in FIU with so many not only honorable people, but also who has do a lot for his country, for his people. The politics is not only for try. We have to do. And I feel privileged in some way because I'm here alive and away from the jail. That's a privilege when we face a dictatorship like we faced and we challenge in the ground in Venezuela. In this room there are 3 people, Demóstenes, Gilbert, and Rollman, who was in jail in Venezuela, who was tortured in that brutal regime a few days ago. I've been here by 5th month. Yesterday, I was my 5th month in the US. So I just want to raise not only the voice for democracy, to help the young generations to improve our democracy. We need to improve our democracy. We need to improve our institutions. To stay healthy, but to stay engaged with the people, with our people. Not only in Venezuela, of course. In Venezuela, we don't have any institutions. We have to rebuild all the institutions back in Venezuela. But the democracy has, in this moment, not only a failure in Latin America. It's around the world, but we've seen how he's losing his grip, his tightness with the society. So, estaré amablemente conversando con los estudiantes, no solamente trasladando lo que fue el ejercicio del gobierno interino, una audaz y determinada acción política democrática en el marco de la Constitución para enfrentar en terreno a una brutal dictadura, sino también cuáles fueron los errores materiales que pudimos haber cometido, por defecto en muchas de las ocasiones, por cierto. También lo que significa reconstruir la unidad en terreno para enfrentar a un régimen como este, los incentivos que tienen las dictaduras hoy para seguir cometiendo delitos y cómo ponerles contención. Ayer conversábamos de las sanciones, por un lado, lo que significa NATO en el caso de Europa, cómo esa capacidad coercitiva puede beneficiar o no cuando no se tiene, cuáles son los incentivos de cara a un régimen como el de Maduro, pero lo que sí buscamos es que sea muy humana. No hay un hecho político, Carlos, ambassadors, presidentes, sin que haya un hecho principalmente humano. La política no puede dejar de ser empática por la gente, con la gente. Y eso es central en este momento de Latinoamérica, cuando vemos la crisis migratoria en este país, producto, por cierto, en su mayoría de regímenes dictatoriales brutales, y tiene que ser un abordaje muy inclusivo, muy... ¿Y qué significa resistir en terreno? Y con esto concluyo esta primera parte. Lo conversamos ayer y utilizo una metáfora ya que hay una nueva, digamos, atención al fútbol, sobre todo en esta ciudad, ¿no? Para jugar cualquier deporte, digamos fútbol, usted necesita una cancha, un balón, un equipo, probablemente un estadio, y si es a nivel competitivo, probablemente necesite muchas otras cosas: coach, entrenamiento, práctica. Para hacer democracia, para reconstruir instituciones, se necesitan espacios para mantenerla, para defenderla, para resistir en terreno. ¿Qué hacen estas dictaduras? Bueno, desnivelan la cancha. Y esto no lo hago exagerado, asesinan a los jugadores, los secuestran, los inhabilitan, los persiguen, los expulsan de su país, como es mi caso. La pelota no es una pelota, es una piedra. El arco lo desaparecen, el árbitro lo compran. Y a veces esto se disfraza con propaganda. Y apelan a que el culpable es el imperio. Han escuchado muchas veces hablar seguramente de esa expresión. El gobierno anterior, el enemigo interno que se asocia con ese imperio para saquear supuestamente los recursos. Y entramos en todo lo que tiene que ver con la comunicación. Han escuchado hablar del término posverdad, seguramente. En el caso de Venezuela es posmentira. En el caso de estos regímenes, porque parte distorsionada para vender una falsa narrativa de que se preocupan por el pueblo y se abrogan, además, la defensa de los más vulnerables, cuando son los que más sufren este tipo de regímenes. Así que desde la organización ciudadana para resistir en dictaduras hasta lo que tiene que ver con la comunicación de las herramientas para no solamente nivelar el terreno, sino que más jugadores quieran participar. Y ahí es la parte interesante de la juventud, de las nuevas generaciones. Mientras más jugadores quieran participar del juego, de la política, de la toma de decisiones, seguramente va a ser un juego mucho más posible que venza la libertad, la democracia y contener estas pretensiones no solamente autoritarias, derivan del populismo totalitario, de venidas en dictaduras, en regímenes brutales. Y no empiezan en un día. Y atención, y con esto concluyo esta parte. Las dictaduras no empiezan y se declaran en un día dictaduras, estos regímenes populistas. Empiezan cercenando y cerrando los espacios, haciendo más pequeña la cancha. Medios de comunicación, censura, persecución, inhabilitación, tortura, asesinato, violación de derechos humanos, presos políticos, expropiaciones, hablando del tema económico y la libertad económica, y van cerrando los espacios. Nuestra gran labor es, y lo estudiaremos, lo veremos, lo analizaremos, es cómo en esas condiciones, porque no son otras, y aquí es donde hay que conciliar, y es lo que vamos a tratar de hacer la academia con la práctica. Porque a veces tenemos la gran tentación de hablar desde el deber ser. Es decir, sacamos un inventario de lo que quisiéramos tener en el caso de Venezuela, cuando hablamos de una elección libre y justa, por ejemplo, cuando las condiciones son absolutamente contrarias y desbalanceadas. Tenemos una gran mayoría que resiste, tenemos una idea clara de libertad y democracia, tenemos la posibilidad de movilizar una y otra vez, como ha pasado en los últimos 15 o 17 años en Venezuela, me atrevo a decir, o más, una idea clara de libertad y un valor que ahí queda bien plasmado del federalismo, de la república. Yo creo que eso es fundamental en este momento. Así que concluyo dándote las gracias al FIU, a Carlos, por este increíble programa que ha elevado la voz no solamente de lo que sucede en la región, en Latinoamérica, en el continente, sino de valores fundamentales que tenemos que defender, que rescatar y por los cuales vamos a trabajar. Así que, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for inviting me to be part of this semester at Florida International University. Thank you for putting me in contact with this great, amazing group. And my purpose is to follow in Juan Guaidó's idea, how to invite young people to be more related and more interested in public service. We need the best possible people trying to serve others, and politics is a great tool for doing that. So this is the objective, to try to connect the aspiration of so many young people as we were, and we learn from others. So this is what I would love to do. How to get it? The study group's title is In the President's Shoes. When you try to become a pilot, you go to a flight simulator. The idea is to create in the classroom a cockpit of a government, the office of the president, and to invite the participants to be the cabinet of that government, and invite them in a very safe space with no consequences to make decisions. The idea is to follow the full circle of a political life in office. So it starts with planning for running for office. I call that planning to go there. Then running for office, trying to go there. Then, if you win the election, being there. And then you receive, chronologically, all the problems that most of the presidents or prime ministers in the world had to face. And you have to use the tools for that. There are rules of the game. I call them rules of the game. Let's say 3 of them: democracy, globalization, artificial intelligence. You mentioned already that. So we have to play in this field that Juan described with that kind of rules. And then you have what I call the tools of the trade. I think that any leader in the world or any public servant need to use 4 tools. One is a decision-making process. Second, negotiation skills. Third, abilities to lead. And 4, how to communicate. Because we need to use these 4 tools to manage our activities and to produce good results. In my case, this full circle ends with a coup d'etat. So it has the thrilling aspects to it as well. And life after office. There's life after politics. So I will try to combine the real challenges of the office plus a certain philosophy of life to give them like a taste of what this is about. When I was listening to our colleagues, I felt like we are offering as a group like a big buffet for the students. You can pick from each one of us one session, one class, one subject. And I think that is incredible. And it's a great idea, Carlos, to produce this. Finally, we have heard that politics is the art of the possible. I prefer another definition. Politics is the art to make possible what it is necessary for a society. And with that vision, I hope that we will have a great journey during the semester. Thank you.
We will. Thank you, Mr. President. So that was the easy round. Let's go with the hard round now. And I'm going to begin with you, Mr. President. Ecuador is a very small country, but a very complex one, as you know. In the region, we see a lot of instability, political instability everywhere. But there are a few countries where it's very common to have presidents who start and complete their terms. Colombia, Mexico, just to name a few. Not so in Ecuador. Very few presidents get to complete their terms. There have been a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, it's much more common for the president to have to leave early, including the sitting president, who had to call elections and is about to leave and not finish his 4-year term. He's leaving a year and a half early. You were one of those presidents as well who couldn't complete the term. Why? Why that stability? Why can't Ecuadorians stick with their president the way that most other countries do? You might not like the president, you might think the president is unpopular, but why such instability in such a small and beautiful country?
Thank you. We are trying to answer that question in our own country. Actually, probably you know, Latin America is the most diverse continent in the world. And Ecuador is the most diverse country in Latin America. So we have the size of New Jersey or Colorado, the state. And we have like 2 different countries, or more than 2 different countries together. So that is part of the problem. Second, we share many difficulties with other countries. For example, between 1997 and 2002, there were 10 presidents in Latin America that couldn't finish their terms. 10. If you compare that number with the number of countries, and you're a medical doctor, you would say that is a pandemic. There's something in the water. But that was what happened. So I would say every single day, the expectations of the population is growing higher and higher and higher, and the patient is smaller and smaller and smaller. We want big changes now, and some processes take a lot of time. If you want to analyze this from another perspective, you could say that we have been receiving many, many times the suggestion that we should diversify our exports. So we have decided to export former presidents.
Thank you. Madam Ambassador, you talked about your ability to bring people together. You worked for President Carter and for President Trump. Yes. Cannot think of 2 presidents more different in the modern era than Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump. I mentioned that a week ago we hosted President Abinader of the Dominican Republic, the sitting president. That was on Tuesday, exactly 7 days ago. On Wednesday, the former president, President Fernandez, invited me to speak at an event that he was organizing. So on Tuesday, I was with Abinader. Wednesday with Fernandez. They're running against each other. Different political parties. They're going to face each other in the next election in a few months. Both of them were incredibly praiseworthy of you and talked about how you were a model who represented the United States in a way that most other ambassadors, quite frankly, don't do. How do you, in a world that is so polarized, where not only do you think of the other side as your opponent, but as your enemy, How do you bring people together? How do you create consensus when people are so divided, not just in the U.S., but around the world?
That's kind of an easy question for me because it is my firm belief that we all have more in common than we have apart. So I have always looked to start with what we have in common, because I believe that people really fundamentally want the same thing. They want to be able to have an education. They want to be able to go to work. They want to be able to worship freely and safely. They want to be able to go to a shopping center or a bar or their church or synagogue and be able to come home. They want to be able to see their children be successful. They want them to go to school and come back. You have this rash of shootings and, it's just such a deeply polarized world. So I've always believed that you start with what you have in common. You agree to disagree respectfully, but if we can all move forward with the 80% or 90% of what we fundamentally believe as people, as human beings, then you're off to a great start. And then the other 10 or 15% is really subject to negotiation. I've always started from what we have in common.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, we're now in the middle of a war in Europe, a war that we haven't seen, we really haven't seen this type of conflict, right, since the Second World War. How does it end? How do we make sense of such aggression on the part of Russia? How do we make sense of the international community's aid to Ukraine? Is there a way to end this peacefully from a European perspective? I know there isn't a single European perspective. There's multiple European perspectives, but how do you see it as a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Croatia, as a diplomat? How do you see this ending, and what role could the international community play that is not already playing?
Thank you very much for that incredibly difficult question in this moment.
In 5 minutes or less.
In middle of the war, to have a magic way how to stop it, it's next to the impossible. I do believe in diplomacy, and actually first two of my sessions are called aggression on Ukraine and whatever happened with diplomacy. Because there is no diplomacy. There is no world. The world is doing exactly nothing to stop the war. The world is doing one proper thing, and that is supporting the country who is clearly victim on that. Because this is situation, in many occasions in the war, you cannot declare clearly who is aggressor and who is victim. This is one of very, very clear situation. There is an aggressor. It is recognized aggressor. It could be recognized that he would do that aggression years ago. World failed to do it. When he committed that aggression by taking Crimea, what world did? Nothing. World failed to do it. Just to remind you, I had that privilege, really, honor to be on that historical session of Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe in 1994 in Budapest, when it was signed that Ukraine will give up nuclear weapon under the control of Russia. By the way, that was a proposal by President Clinton. Very clever proposal from that moment. Who other countries that signed that? Russia, United Kingdom, in that moment also Belarusia and Kazakhstan, and later two other members of Security Council, China and France. Why I'm telling you that? So what did they guarantee to Ukraine? They said, you give up nuclear weapon, we guarantee to you your sovereignty, territorial and statehood sovereignty. So now I'm going back to 2014, when one of those 5 countries, or 7, demonstrated that for them that is just piece of paper without any value. The world did basically nothing, introduced the sanctions that from the first moment did not respect that sanctions, from the first moment. We even forgot that sanctions were introduced in 2014. Everyone, even including United States, who was champion of that with good reasons. So I think that was the moment when somebody shut down diplomacy. Instead of that, I think that those 4 countries or 5 countries or 7 or entire community needed to do the action and to face the others. Russia, but others also, China. Not to wait until China, because of their internal and external reasons, start to support Putin, but to tell them, look, guys, this is the end of the structure of civilization that we have it. Because if you sign, as a 5 permanent members of Security Council, document that you do not respect, what are we talking about? Who needs to talk about reforms of United Nations? You are destroying United Nations. I don't know if that will change Putin, to be very frank, because he has his idea. But the world would try to change it, and that would be the language of diplomacy, not of the war. Unfortunately, that was failed, and the war just expanded, and we now start to think how we can bring Ukraine to win the war. Allow me to be skeptical about the final outcome. I think that Ukraine already won the war. They prevent Russia to basically destroy Ukraine because they didn't care, to destroy everything. Are they going to be able to return those territories with all weapons that the world is promising to them and not delivering? Even if they deliver, what to do with that weapon? Allow me to say that maybe I'm thinking too much as a diplomat. I don't see that as a fast solution. So the only solution I see as kind of, not necessarily permanent, but temporary solution, we will come to some negotiated deal, some form of the frozen conflict. Let me give you an example. Situation like that is one, by the way, one of the examples that is mentioning 3 potential examples. But for example, and not that I'm arguing for that, Germany was in one moment divided. Nobody believed that it will be, if Germans wanted to keep their unified country, the Second World War will not end in that moment. It will be more all kind of negative things. 40 years after that, in the life of one man or woman, that's huge period. In the life of the nation, that's not necessarily so. And I'm not advocating that Ukraine will wait for 40 years. I'm just telling that in such a big, complex issues, the solution will not, and does not come in a month. It's longer. So what I am pledging, if I can say so, it is a negotiated solution which will stop the casualties, which will stop the war, which will freeze the conflict up to the certain level. Then I would personally be very, very much in favor, as much as I can do, at least verbally, that Ukraine is admitted to NATO. Once, when Ukraine is admitted to NATO, that will be the end of the conflict. That will be the end of suffering of civilian population. So to wait. So dilemma is this: is Ukraine going to wait until it frees all its territory and then to be admitted, or it is going to be some kind of intermediate solution which will allow that? As long as the Ukraine is in a war, there is no way that it becomes a member of NATO. If it is not member of NATO, no weapon can protect them. It is only the organization that can protect them.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. There are a lot of people, a lot of citizens in the U.S. who are unwavering in their commitment to Ukraine. But there are others who feel that, enough is enough. There's a lot of push for accountability. What do you tell, perhaps people in this room, people watching online, what do you tell Americans who are saying, I don't really care about what's happening in Ukraine, it's really far away? Why should they care about what's happening in Ukraine? What's in it for them?
They should care very much.
Why?
Because, number one, we have a guy who is sitting in Moscow and who is in control of the weapon that can destroy the entire civilization. And that is the fact. It is not Kubrick's movie. It is the reality. I believe that that is not going to happen. We all believe and we hope. But how many times in history we hope and we believe that something will not happen and that happened? So that is the easiest. I know, distant to us, but the easiest. The other thing, let's face it, and this is the reality of the 20th century, of 21st century. Without American leadership, there is no solution, full stop. That was proven at the beginning of 20th century, that was proven in the middle of 20th century, that was proven in a war in former Yugoslavia. We could fight the war until today if there were no people with a vision in White House and in Washington who moved the others. And the others were opposing very often because there is no same interest, but we came to the solution. So what I would argue, the fatigue is understandable. And it's bad when those big issues, which becomes narrowly political issues, when we have a partisan approach to that. Because, what is the difference being Republican or Democrat here in looking into what's going on in Ukraine or in China or in India? I don't see, and I don't think that should be big difference. So I would pledge, United States must lead. Not to be part of the efforts, must lead efforts to come to the solution, but of course, efforts which are realistic and not just based on the promises. And let me be brutally open. It is not how many billions of new money Congress approved. It is what is the action that it is needed and what is the solution. And then, trust me one thing, I cannot talk about Latin America, although everybody is involved. Talking about Europe, Europe will do absolutely nothing unless there is a clear leadership from United States. When there is a leadership, they will be, on discussion like that, they will be opposing, they will be complaining, oh, those Americans there, but they will be following that. If there is not that leadership, 27 countries, there are at least 5 different solutions which are, excluding one another. So I'm pledging for American leadership in that and for a solution as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Mr. President, you became interim president of Venezuela in January of 2019. Very high expectations. At the height of your government, you had over 60 countries around the world who recognized you as the legitimate president of the country, not the dictator. 4 years later, 4.5 years later, Maduro's still in power, and you're here. What happened?
Well, a lot of things. Indeed, a pandemic in between of the time. But I think we didn't realize the brutality and of the capable of Maduro was to align with Russia, with Iran. The Venezuelan issue is not only a Venezuelan issue. It's a geopolitical approach to that matter in this moment. I mean, almost 8 million Venezuelans have flew from our country. Most of them are trying to reach United States in this moment. They have been walking about thousands of kilometers or miles, looking for opportunities, looking for safety, and Maduro lo subestimamos, underestimate in some way. We thought, like Europe with Russia in some moment, that the economic approach to Russia could be useful, and that blew up everything and everyone. With Maduro, the some approach, we commit, but also what we not do. I mean, the greatest failure was in what we don't do. For example, replicating the healthcare heroes program for vulnerable people in the middle of the pandemic was useful. We have to use that tool for the military people, for example. In a dictatorship regime, the military people is one of the key factors for make a transition, for achieve a healthy transition. You can achieve a transition without the military group, but not against the military group. So that was one issue, the unity, the work in process, constant work in process of making consensus. It's a everyday task, every day, with all political groups back in Venezuela. In certain point, we have trade too much to gain unity. In the other side, oppose against the regime. So we have to level it, that formula, fast to face the regime. The unity has to be a requirement, not the goal. So we have to use it against the regime. Also, all the situation make us vulnerable in some level. And we want to look like strong. We have to show our vulnerability. And in 2020, the regime bribery 7 deputies from 200, with money of Alex Saab, which is in jail, like he has to in the United States in this moment. They almost succeeded in one way, in the communication way. 7 deputies from 200, and they construct all a propaganda, like in short point, the press were asking me, well, but are some deputies getting enough from the situation of the interim government? And we were unable to explain in a better way because all the PR strategy from the regime with a lot of money. I mean, 7 deputies, 35 million of euros. Do the math. What represent in a country in an intervention? I mean, so we have a lot to process in this moment. We have a lot to do also because there is an important issue in this moment. When we communicate, when I communicate, I am communicating about a process ongoing, an ongoing process in this moment. I have to be care about the people in the ground. I have to be care about the output of the primary election or the next possible election in 2024. But we have to learn fast. So Maduro still are in Caracas because he is a brutal dictatorship who have no problem to align with Russia, we sell our territory to Iran, to Russia, and China. I mean, you mentioned it, Ambassador, Russia, China, and it's not only over there on Europe. They are here, in the middle of the continent, looking for problems. I mean, so our issue, or Venezuelan issue, is not only a Venezuelan issue. It's an Latin American, it's a global security issue, and we have to care about it. I'm doing completely in this one in English. The next one in Spanish.
Well, the next one, I want to ask you a personal question. When President Mahuad was in office, he had a presidential palace, he had control over the military, he had control over the budget. You didn't have that. You had a very difficult situation for you and your family. Your family's here with us, so thank you for coming. So I want to ask you sort of a personal question to get to the human side, right? There is no such thing as a typical day in the life of a president, of course. But when you are in a presidential palace with a big staff, there's some order, there's a set schedule, there's some sense of normalcy. You had to flee from, sleep in different places at different times. You had to sort of go from place to place, undercover. What was that like? Can you tell us a typical day in the life of Juan Guaidó when he was interim president? You and your family.
Well, we are in a country with a dictator and a legitimate claim to institutional authority. And that collide every day in our life, in our activities, in our duties. Because I swear on January 23 to make possible and free election. We are in this moment trying to help our people, but I'm gonna say this in Spanish. Un día a la oficina. Les voy a narrar un día para llegar a la oficina. To reach our office. One day to reach our office. Nos levantábamos muy temprano, 5:30. Obviamente cuando uno está en estas responsabilidades, lo primero que hace es pasar revista. ¿Cierto, presidente? Todos los pendientes iniciales. Un martes típicamente sesión de la Asamblea Nacional en Venezuela. Me levantaba, saludaba obviamente a la familia. Miranda Eugenia tenía mi hija mayor, que hoy tiene 6, 2, 3 años. Ya empezaba a hacer preguntas muy precarias, muy distintas a las que hace ahora, que son todo un reto, por cierto, en sí mismo. Y venía el primer cambio de vehículo. Es decir, tendría que salir de un lugar en semiclandestinidad porque me perseguían 4 organismos de seguridad. DGCIN, SEBIN, colectivos, que como ustedes saben en Venezuela son paramilitares armados por la dictadura, y uno adicional que nunca sabíamos si era el FAES, si eran Cuban agents, o no lo sabíamos. Para distraerlos salían 4 vehículos de diferentes sitios. Llegamos a un sótano, me cambiaba de vehículo, llegaba al punto intermedio y llegaba luego a un tercer sitio donde el régimen pensaba que pernoctaba. Y puede parecer exagerado, pero yo le pido a Gilbert, Rollman, disculpen que les pida que se levanten, Demóstenes. Ellos estuvieron algunos más de 2 años en cárcel porque a veces no era suficiente el mecanismo de seguridad. Demóstenes, perdón que lo diga, Demo, primera vez que lo digo en tu presencia, estuvo colgado de las manos. Perdón que te pedí hacer la... ...200 días. En la celda de al lado estaba mi tío. Escuchando los gritos. Se llama tortura blanda. Al igual que Gilbert Caro, diputado de la Asamblea Nacional, Rollman, diputado por el Estado Aragua, estuvieron centenares de días en lo que llaman el Tigrito, que es una celda básicamente de 2x2. Y para nosotros evitar precisamente que nos capturaran cuando le diera la gana a la dictadura, nos tocaba hacer estos mecanismos de seguridad. Y eran las 8 de la mañana todavía. Luego íbamos al Palacio Federal Legislativo, que estaba rodeado por paramilitares, por la fuerza de seguridad. La mayor parte de las veces disparos, bombas lacrimógenas. La Guardia Nacional, que es la principal agente de seguridad o de resguardo ciudadano. Perdón, pueden sentarse. Gracias y disculpen, pero creo que el testimonio vivo de ustedes es no solamente poderoso, sino un compromiso para seguir. Y además, gracias por venir. Luego llegamos a las 8:30, luego de 3 anillos de seguridad de la dictadura, seguridad obviamente entre comillas, era parte del aparato represivo, y empezaba la sesión de la Asamblea Nacional. Algunas reuniones para construir consensos, diariamente en las primeras reuniones con los grupos políticos, para diseñar estrategias. Pero lo interesante de esto, Carlos, y hablando de cómo nivelar la cancha, era que cuando teníamos consolidado un equipo, y tú decías, bueno, podemos hoy ir a la ofensiva. You can go offense in this moment. Secuestraban a uno. O peor aún, como el caso de Pipo, Edmundo Rada, que en paz descanse, lo asesinaban, concejal en Petare, en el barrio más grande de Latinoamérica, en el neighborhood. Entonces, eso era, y luego explicarle a Miranda Eugenia por qué mi vehículo tenía huecos en la ventana. A una niña de 4 años ya en ese momento. Y explicarle por qué había que cambiarla de carro 5 veces para ir al colegio. Por lo menos. Para evitar que en las noches o nos secuestraran o seamos presas fácil de una dictadura. Y de nuevo, esto era para ir a la oficina. Narrarles cómo llegamos a los estados para acompañar a los venezolanos en Aragua, en Puerto La Cruz, en Maracaibo. Es distinto. Cómo logramos diseñar las manifestaciones y las protestas para evitar casualties, para que sean seguras cuando enfrentamos lo que enfrentamos, es decir, non-violent struggle? ¿Y cuál es la utilidad de ese tipo de protestas en regímenes autoritarios? Las conversaciones con los presidentes, con los embajadores. Así que esto fue parte de nuestro día a día durante más de 4 años. Y como nivelamos la cancha, Carlos, y concluyo con esto, es parte de lo que vamos a conversar con los estudiantes, con la universidad, bueno, es precisamente, y es el reto que tenemos, es cómo proteger a los que están en terreno, en conflictos de regímenes no solamente autoritarios, sino incluso en guerra. En guerra pareciera obvio cómo se hace, ¿no? Pero esto es una especie de guerra. Tanto es así que hay 8 millones de refugiados. Tanto es así que se destruyó el 80% de la economía. 80% en 12 años. Tanto es así que hay una amenaza regional muy clara y un cónclave de crimen organizado que vemos cómo opera, por cierto, en Ecuador, cómo opera en Colombia y cómo opera en territorio nacional. La buena, digamos, respuesta a todo esto es que logramos resistir 4 años a este asedio, que nuestro equipo hoy se mantiene, incluso los que mantienen en terreno, los que llevan la voz a nivel mundial, se mantienen firmes en un método de lucha. Y atención con esto. Eso es importante de cara a una posible transición en el corto plazo en Venezuela.
Let me ask you very, very, very briefly, if you can, because there is no easy answer, but how determinant was the role of the Cuban regime in helping Maduro stay afloat?
Bueno, en muchos niveles, no solamente a nivel de inteligencia, a nivel de seguridad, a nivel de bypass US sanctions or European sanctions, and the approach to make accountable these kind of dictators has to be overall. If you put the sanction on Maduro's regime, but he has Russia to bypass all the tools that we have to make them accountable, you are losing your few tools that you have to make not only accountable, but to gain maybe a role of enforcement. Again, we don't have NATO. We don't have any kind of tools that require not the use of force, I mean, but the make, forcible a decision, a common decision, la Carta Interamericana de los Derechos Humanos. I mean, you have been talking about the UN ambassador, la Carta Interamericana de Derechos Humanos. Today is like poetry. A beautiful one, I mean, beautiful one. I want that. I want that. But it's clearly ineffective in this moment. So the Cuban regime helped not only Maduro, also Ortega and other kind of regime to bypass sanctions or tools that make them accountable, but also to provide them with intelligence, with security. I lived that in several occasions when they persecute me, when we faced like repression, and the Cubans was ordered to generals in the ground how to move, how to shoot. For me, it was amazing. I mean, we heard a lot about it, and we can think, no, that's a lie. That's not happened. I saw it. I lived it several times on the ground with our people resisting in the ground, with non-struggle violence, with our tools, that constitutions tools. So when we have pariah regimes, they gonna be a focus of distortion, of aggression, of soft aggression, not only soft power, but soft aggression around the continent, and of course, for Venezuela, and also the United States of America.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions for each one of you. I'm going to let the students ask the questions now, but we're going to do another one of these events. I want to ask the ambassador about NATO and about how President Trump's insistence that European nations pay their share dues impacted the alliance. I want to ask the ambassador about U.S. policy on towards the Caribbean, how we have ignored the Caribbean for far too long, and what we can do to revive our relationship with the Caribbean in particular, and Latin American in general. I want to ask the president about the upcoming elections in Ecuador in a couple of weeks, and I want to ask about dollarization. There's a big debate right now in the world, in Latin America, Argentina, for example. Argentina is thinking about dollarizing. When should a country give up its currency and adopt the US dollar? What has to happen for that to work? And I want to ask the president as well about the role of the US, what the US should have done, could have done differently, and about the elections that are coming up. Venezuela is going to have a primary election in a few weeks and a general election at some point next year. Is it going to be a real election? Are we going to have some sort of semblance of different people competing for power, or is it a done deal? Tons of questions that we're going to board in the next one of these meetings, but I want to turn it over to you. We have a few minutes for questions, so I'm going to ask if the students could go first, and I'll ask that you state your name, where you're from, and remember that questions end in a question mark. So, right here, wait for the microphone so that the camera, do we have a microphone? Right here, thank you. Name, where you're from, where you're studying, and then question with a question mark.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sebastian. Thank you for coming. I appreciate this opportunity and all of you coming down to Florida. But I study international relations, specifically in the Middle East. But I wanted to address this question for Foreign Minister Žužul, for Ambassador Bernstein. I was curious to find between your stances, your perspectives more on conducting diplomacy. One from the stance of a country like the United States with relative equals being Russia, China, and in that world setting, and from the stance of Croatia, where by the most part, like any other country, to put it simply, like in the periphery of this world, what it's like conducting that diplomacy, being swept away by the currents of either one of the countries in Europe, either by the European Union or by NATO, and having to go along with those, or rather by the US, where you conduct that policy.
As far as how we conducted diplomacy in the Dominican Republic, every country is guided by every ambassador to every country is guided by the administration's goals, and it's called an interactive strategic plan. And when you first come to a country, you are given a roadmap, if you will, from, let's say, from Washington to California. And to say, our goal is to get from Washington to California. And then it's really up to the individual ambassadors and their team together to come up with a tactical plan. How are you going to go? You're going the way of the South? You're going to go via Ohio? You're going to do a straight line? How are you going to get there? And so we really have this overarching goal that we are required to follow, and we work with the Secretary of State, the National Security Council, the White House, on how we go about getting there. For me personally, I would we set out the plan, and then I would meet with my team. We'd do an offsite. I asked it an offsite quarterly, and we adjusted the plan. Sometimes we found things that weren't working as perfectly as we had hoped that they would be, so we tinkered with the plan. I think that any good leader should have a strategic plan. You have to know where you're going. And then it's really up to the individual ambassador and his or her team to determine how you're going to get there. But as anything, stuff happens, right? It just happens that the unexpected will always happen, and that's what I would say is normal. If you think that there's going to be a normal day when you wake up in the morning, you got another thing coming when you're a president or an ambassador, right? Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's normal is that the day isn't going to be normal. So you always have to plan for the unexpected, and that's one of the things that I hope to bring to the class is how do you plan for the unexpected? How do you pivot when things aren't going as you want?
Thank you.
I think that Ambassador gave excellent example how the diplomacy is functioning. I would add only one thing, and I would even urge for that from my experience. There are situations which that normal, everyday normal with abnormality becomes way more abnormal, and then, that is when there is a war. I experienced working with absolutely superb American diplomats who were not just a bilateral ambassador, but special envoys. That is something that exists in diplomacy since the beginning of diplomacy, and I'm not going now to try to explain what is the difference. The difference, but I think that special envoy role is extremely important in a critical situation like war. If nothing else, the communication is way faster, and it needs faster. Special envoy typically communicate directly, let's say in the United States, either with the Secretary of State or with the president, an office of the president, without going through well-established diplomatic rules. I had the privilege working with Ambassador Chuck Redman, that you might know, then Ambassador Bob Fraser, who unfortunately was killed in Bosnia, then Ambassador Richard Dick Holbrooke, who basically brought the peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and all they have the role of special envoy, which is, I should say, addition to what Ambassador described, how the diplomacy is functioning.
Thank you. All right, next question, right here. Right next to you. There you go.
Hello, my name is Carlos Rodriguez Lopez. I'm a political science and international relations student here at FIU, and I also write for the blog Caracas Chronicles. My question is for President Guaidó. Can I ask it in Spanish?
Sure.
Sí. Bueno. Viendo como usted ha describido todas estas operaciones que hace el gobierno venezolano para reprimir, para tratar de suprimir a los venezolanos bajo un frágil proceso de primaria como estamos viviendo ahora, la posibilidad de un sabotaje el día del 22 de octubre es bastante real. Ante ese escenario, ¿cuál debería ser los pasos que debería tomar la oposición para elegir su candidato a las presidenciales? Se ha hablado mucho del consenso, otros han hablado de una elección por encuestas. Le quiero preguntar al presidente Guaidó cuál debería ser el camino que hay que seguir. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, primero gracias por la pregunta, porque lo primero es que tú lo acabas de describir bien. Es un proceso frágil, vulnerable, porque estamos en una dictadura. Estamos en un campo inclinado, brutal. Y por eso, primero, mi respeto y mi admiración a los que siguen en terreno insistiendo, ¿no? Defendiendo, acompañando a los venezolanos, entre otras cosas. Lo primero que hay que valorar y buscar desde este rol apoyarlos. Yo creo que tenemos que insistir en la primaria, y suena paradójico, pero tenemos que insistir en el mecanismo de movilización y no verla como un mecanismo... ¿Me dijiste tu nombre? Carlos. Gracias, Carlos. Y no verlo, Carlos, como sencillamente quién tiene más votos. Sería estéril ese proceso para los venezolanos, porque estamos en una dictadura, sino como un ejercicio de legitimación del liderazgo, como un ejercicio de organización, de movilización, de no solamente ejercicio de mayoría, incluso estando en una dictadura, y entender sin ingenuidad, ¿no? Que creo que es importante que enfrentemos una dictadura que va a tratar de atacar ese proceso. ¿Por qué? Relato breve. En el 2015 ganamos el Parlamento Nacional con votos. Evidentemente ellos luego descartaron completamente la elección, porque sabían que son vulnerables. Pasó en Barinas recientemente. Ahora, el gran reto va a ser el famoso what if. Y en el caso de Venezuela no es what if, es ¿qué pasa cuándo? Y ahí es donde en este momento debemos ponernos de acuerdo para hacer valer la voluntad popular, la voluntad del pueblo. Es decir, la expresión de la primaria. Hay que proteger la primaria. Si no se logra la primaria, tenemos que insistir en un mecanismo de conteo y de medición, porque yo creo que un consenso es muy frágil hoy en Venezuela. Es decir, estamos muy, de alguna manera, deslegitimados los partidos políticos. Y el proceso de movilización popular debe perseguir legitimidad, porque es el espacio y el ejercicio del poder de la gente. Así que lo primero es eso. Y luego, hablar en este momento de un mecanismo de sucesión, creo que debilitaría en sí mismo la primaria. Ahora, creo que, de nuevo, sin ingenuidad, como decimos en Venezuela, sin chuparse el dedo, debemos tener todas las herramientas. Hay un concepto, y aprovechando que estamos en la universidad, podemos hablar de conceptos académicos, acuñados, si no me equivoco, por Huntington, que él habla del stunning election, ¿no? ¿Qué significa un stunning election? ¿No? La traducción al español, por cierto, no es tan buena. Una elección sorprendente. No vas a sorprender a una dictadura. ¿Qué significa? Que es un activador. Yo le llamaría más trigger election, ¿no? Es un activador del ejercicio de mayoría, de tomar por mayoría la organización, la movilización, y ahí tenemos que apuntar, entendiendo que es una herramienta. ¿Cuál ha sido también alguno de los errores, Carlos? Creer que, por ejemplo, las sanciones cambian un régimen. Tienen una utilidad, tienen una función, y es parte de las herramientas o los mecanismos para presionar, que es fácilmente activable la responsabilidad de proteger, cosa que nunca ha pasado, por cierto, en la historia reciente en el mundo, o que solamente el voto en una dictadura va a cambiar. Entonces, ¿cuál va a ser la clave para nosotros? Sin ingenuidad, entender que todas estas son herramientas posibles. Hay que cambiar los incentivos a estas dictaduras en la región. Es decir, cuando Maduro ve a Ortega, luego del 21, haciendo lo que hizo, encarcelando a todos los precandidatos. Es decir, yo estoy aquí hoy en el sur de la Florida, gracias a Dios, por si no estuviera preso o peor. Pero, ¿qué vamos a hacer para proteger el resto? Entonces, ahí va a estar la clave para nosotros como venezolanos, de cara primero el 22 de octubre y luego el 2024. Llámalo stunning election, llámalo trigger election, para activar procesos de movilización, de ejercicio de mayoría, de defensa, y un tema adicional que no depende de nosotros. Para nosotros, Carlos, embajadora, presidente, nivelar la cancha solos es complejo, ¿no? Cuando tienes a la fuerza además de los rusos, de los cubanos, haciendo presión sin pudor del otro lado. Vamos a necesitar, como hicimos en el 2019, fue uno de los grandes logros entonces en el 2019, realinear a la comunidad internacional para ser responsable de la dictadura, para acompañar un proceso de protección de venezolanos en terreno, los más vulnerables por supuesto, pero también los que están liderando el proceso de cambio, y ahí va a estar la clave, sin falsas expectativas, ¿no? De lo que significa, estando en dictadura, un proceso de movilización, de legitimación del liderazgo y por supuesto de activación de un proceso de cambio. Por eso transforma un poquito el concepto o la frase que utiliza Huntington de stunning a trigger para reactivar un proceso no de agitación, por cierto, porque el reto en Venezuela es cómo ejercer la mayoría de manera segura, porque hay una mayoría consolidada y eso ha sido parte también del trabajo. Y con esto concluyo. No se puede olvidar en ningún momento, Carlos, el ABC. ¿Qué significa el ABC? Ya nosotros en Venezuela hemos pasado por muchos stages. Hemos construido mayoría, la hemos demostrado electoralmente. Creamos un gobierno interino de manera muy audaz en el 2019 con el apoyo de 60 países. Pero el ABC, es decir, the basics, ¿no? Tiene que ser central. Organización ciudadana, comunicación constante, comunicación efectiva y, atención con esto, afectiva. Tiene que ser efectiva y afectiva con el ciudadano para acompañarlo en sus necesidades, porque esto sigue siendo, y procuramos una democracia. La idea no tiene que ser solamente la correcta, sí tiene que ser abrazada por todos para que sea definitivamente exitosa. Así que, como lo ves, es un reto gigante, pero yo veo grandes ventanas de oportunidad, sí, como hemos hecho en el pasado, y ahí es donde mantengo no solamente la esperanza y la fe, en mi caso de volver pronto, pero de millones también, ¿no? Lo hemos hecho una y otra vez. Tenemos 12 o 14 años haciéndolo una y otra vez. En el 2012 lo hicimos, en el 2013, en el 2014 incluso, en el 2015 con la Asamblea Nacional, en el 2016 con el revocatorio, en el 2017 en las calles protestando, en el 2018 no convalidando un fraude como lo hicimos, en el 2019 creando un gobierno interino. Entonces, de nuevo, no es que no lo hemos hecho, es que y por eso te decía, Carlos, Maduro se sostiene porque es un brutal dictador, porque ante todo eso ha decidido asesinar, matar, perseguir, aliarse con los bad guys, como dice Applebaum, también los definen brillantemente. Entonces ahí donde va a estar el reto en el cortísimo plazo, 30 días, y menos de 6, 7 u 8 meses de cara a cuando coloquen la fecha de la posibilidad de una elección presidencial.
Y complicando todo esto muchísimo más, existe la posibilidad, con una probabilidad no insignificante, de que la persona que pudiese ganar estas primarias está inhabilitada
Que es donde apunta,
en este momento.
que es donde apunta Carlos, qué hacer,
¿qué hacer?
no el what if,
Exacto.
sino el what when.
Exacto. Lo
Y
cual
ahí es
complica la cosa
donde
mucho.
yo creo que la sucesión también se está discutiendo, pero creo que no debemos debilitar la opción primera de quién tiene responsabilidad y deber, porque de nuevo, cuando emitimos comentarios, cuando emitimos opinión, estando acá, hay gente que está exponiendo su vida en terreno. Y aquí una crítica constructiva, incluso que veo algunos buenos amigos de los medios de comunicación. Y no en tu caso, obviamente, o sea, todo lo contrario, lo ha hecho con mucha responsabilidad y aplomo. Y gracias, por cierto. Sino que hay veces que están, por ejemplo, imagínense ustedes, ¿cómo salió Juan, Guaidó de Venezuela o Fabiana? Hay mucha gente que me ha preguntado, ¿dónde? ¿Cómo fue? Si yo digo eso, por hablar de mi caso, expongo a los que nos ayudaron. A que los asesinen, a que los torturen, a que los metan en la cárcel, o peor aún, les digo algo, a sus familias las persigan. Me pasó en Nueva Esparta. La persona que me trasladó a mí a Nueva Esparta, cuando fui a Nueva Esparta, atención con esto, explotaron su casa. La explotaron. Pero también exponemos una ruta segura de gente que probablemente tengamos nosotros que evacuar por persecución o algunas otras cosas a veces más dramáticas.
You have 3 minutes, so if the questions are brief, we can do 2 more questions. We'll do right here, 1, and then 1 here. So go ahead, and then we'll conclude. Yeah, 1 here, and then concluding question. And again, they're going to be teaching for the next 8 weeks, so please take their classes and study groups.
Hello, everyone. I'm a freshman here at FIU studying political science. My name is Andrés Gómez. Y le tengo una pregunta a los presidentes. ¿De dónde sacan las fuerzas cuando están desanimados? O en tu caso, cuando tu vida está en riesgo, ¿de dónde sacas el ánimo? ¿De dónde sacas las fuerzas cuando no te quieres levantar? No sé. Esa es la pregunta.
Where do you find your strength to keep on going, the 2 presidents?
Presidente, piense usted. Que ha tenido mucha más fuerza.
I think the 2 most important questions in life are, who am I and what do I live for? And those 2 questions should be answered before running for office. We have an internal GPS, like the GPS you have in the car. So you have to find where is your north and try to align your life with that. With a map, you can get confused. If you miss an exit, you are lost. With a compass, you never get lost because you always know where the north is. So based on that assumption, you have to decide many times what to do. And the difference with here now is that you don't have time. There's a sense of urgency. You don't have certitude. There's a lot of uncertainties. And the stakes are so high, and you have to decide. And the chances of making a wrong decision are very high. However, I always go back to Ortega y Gasset, the philosopher from Spain. I am I and my circumstances. And you cannot judge a person or the actions of a person if you do not consider the context in which those decisions are made. And the second from Ortega y Gasset as well is, every human being is fatally forced to choose. Animals act by instinct. They just react. Rational people have to decide. And if you decide not to decide, you are deciding already. So if you aspire to the presidency of a country, one question is the what for? And that is your action plan. You're asking for a mandate for doing these things. But the second question is not what for, but why. What is your internal motivation to trying to get that office? And what prices are you ready to pay for doing the right thing when you are there? I have found that there are 4 reasons why people want power. One is raw power. They like to show who is the boss. They want to show who makes the decisions. They use the power to settle some disputes from before. They punish some people, etc. That's one. Another reason is to get all the benefits the power can bring to you, very material things. The third one is more like historical, what our libertadores in Latin America used to call glory or fame or reputation. And the fourth is service. And you can apply the 4 motivations to any doctor, lawyer, journalist, professor. We are just human beings, as Carlos said when he opened the session. So we all have the 4. We are not angels or demons. We are humans. But the percentage of each one determines what kind of person you are compared to another. And when service is the first one, not the only one, but the first one, you know that you go there to take a lot of risks, and you have to pay for the consequences. But if you do that, if you follow your consciousness, at the end of the day, every single day you are only with one person, yourself. And if you follow your internal compass and you do what your serene judgment tells you to do, you can suffer, but you can sleep. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine from Mexico told me once, every single moment in life you have to choose between eating well or sleeping well. If you decide to sleep well, most surely you can eat well, not the other way around. So being at peace with yourself is the best source of strength I have found in my life. Not easy, but it is possible.
Mr. President.
Muy breve, porque el presidente me ayudó. Ciertamente hay que decir el costo a pagar en el camino del servicio. Hay una frase también que yo acompaño de San Ignacio de Loyola: en todo amar y servir. Y también es una decisión diaria para poder sobrellevar lo que implica la carga. Hay una metáfora famosa, la carga del poder, ¿no? En las decisiones, y ahí incluso te puedes llegar a sentir solo por momentos, con intereses cruzados. Evalúas muy bien tu entorno constantemente, pero yo creo que nunca puedes querer tanto algo que se te olvida por qué lo quieres, ¿no? Y ahí muchos confunden en ocasiones el fin con el medio. Yo tenía constante en mi andar diario el por qué inicié en política, el por qué participé por una elección a diputado, el por qué quiero democracia en mi país, y también te encuentras pequeñas cosas que te van ayudando en el día a día. Yo creo que lo cotidiano al final del día suena a cliché, pero es lo más poderoso. El abrazo de tu familia, dormir bien, a veces es la mejor recompensa, y poder ver la cara, a los ojos a tu gente constantemente es una recompensa también diaria. Y en mi caso yo tenía a mis bebés, ¿no? Aquí está Fabiana, mi madre. Eso era parte de lo que se convirtió luego en mi oficina. Porque hablando de la oficina, luego la secuestraron varias veces, la tomaron militarmente. Entonces, es parte también de esa. No subestimes ni subestimen nunca esas pequeñas cosas y esas pequeñas victorias de la cotidianidad, de dormir con la conciencia tranquila y saber por qué haces lo que haces, porque tus decisiones tienen consecuencias sobre ti, sobre tu entorno, sobre tu familia. Y ahí concluyo además esta parte de lo que ha sido mi motivación diaria con mi familia, que está además mi madre, que estuvo exilada antes que yo porque la querían detener y meter presa también en el régimen. Y en mi caso, presidente, embajador, yo decidí ser político. Yo decidí, ellos no. Ellos me acompañaron en esa decisión y también pagaron de alguna manera las consecuencias de nuestras decisiones. Y ahí la determinación y la constante anclaje en la motivación, en el propósito, creo que también es muy importante para seguir un día más. Funciona también, por cierto, en la universidad. Cuando estuve en la universidad pensaba todos los días, ¿por qué elegí ingeniería? Así que hay pequeñas decisiones en la vida, o sea, que te van llevando siempre y cuando tengas no solamente tu propósito, la posibilidad de ver a tu gente a la cara y lo que te conduce a algunos, aunque la tradición latinoamericana de nuestros libertadores es un poco exagerada, tengo que decir en mi humilde opinión, ¿no? Pero también tiene que ver un poco con la trascendencia, ¿no? y lo que mañana o el día siguiente también van a decir de tus actos.
So we're past time, and the ambassador has to teach in 7 minutes. So we have one concluding question. Make it brief, and it's going to be really difficult to top that question in terms of inspiration. So no pressure, but make it brief. And the answers, please, even briefer.
Thank you, everyone. Asil, I'm from Venezuela, Middle Eastern, but born and raised in Los Guayos, Venezuela. I'm a freshman here in FIU, majoring in international relations, and my brief question is going to be for His Excellency Juan Guaidó and the Honorable Miss Robin. So, can I ask in Spanish? Sorry.
Yes, but make it brief.
En su opinión, teniendo en cuenta que el tema de los militares en Venezuela es algo que parte mucho de la movilización del movimiento populista, ¿cómo cree usted que puede ser en algún momento, cree que existe alguna esperanza donde se pueda consignar una cooperación con ellos? Y en sí, ¿de qué forma estas fuerzas militares se puedan allegar y cambiar todas estas desgracias que están pasando en nuestro país? Y en sí, ¿cuál sería el rol de la diplomacia en dictaduras, en regímenes tan frágiles como estos? ¿Cuál pudiese ser el approach de la diplomacia para cesar estas situaciones?
How do you know she speaks Spanish? She does.
No es perfecto. Repeat it in English, please.
What's the role of diplomacy?
The role of diplomacy? I think the role of the diplomacy should be, first of all, to, number one, if you are the ambassador, a U.S. ambassador to a country, number one is you're the voice of the president in that country. And the second thing is that your key role, beside issuing visas and all the, the day-to-day things, is you are there to protect the Americans that live, work, and travel there. That is our primary role as the U.S. ambassador, beside speaking for the president and leading your team.
Mr. President.
Bueno, la verdad el tema da para una tesis, por lo menos, o libros incluso.
Toma su clase.
Sí, pero es fundamental el rol de la Fuerza Armada en la transición. Y en el caso de Venezuela, donde ellos entendieron muy bien, además muy bien asesorados por el régimen cubano, que tenían que cooptar, sobre todo a la élite, pero también ahí tiene que haber una aproximación humana. Hay soldados, sargentos, tenientes, capitanes, mayores, tenientes coroneles o coroneles que están pasando hambre, que se les va el agua, que su familia no tiene lugar de educación. De nuevo, la aproximación a la política o el abordaje a la política hacia la Fuerza Armada también tiene que ser humano, entendiendo los intereses de quienes hoy comandan la élite y que tienen vinculación estrecha con grupos irregulares, con la criminalidad. Pero hay ejercicios que intentamos en el caso de Venezuela, y lo vamos a hablar durante las clases del 30 de abril. Eso fue una comunicación con la Fuerza Armada, con sus errores, evidentemente. Pero ahí tiene que haber un esfuerzo constante de comunicación con un sector de la sociedad. Imagínate que son los médicos o que son los profesores, un sector de la sociedad vivo, además, que hoy sostienen, sin duda, el régimen de Maduro. Así que es una aproximación humana, entendiendo lo que sufre el grueso del componente militar o la familia militar. Y le digo con propiedad, además, mis dos abuelos fueron militares, ¿no? Y además tengo un insight, digamos, de lo que fue ese componente o lo que significó, pero, de nuevo, sin ingenuidad, abordando muchos de lo que son los intereses de esa élite hoy que funciona como un partido político en armas. Atención con eso, en el caso de Venezuela, la élite, y luego cómo lograr, no digamos que se pongan del lado de la Constitución, porque eso sería lo ideal. No estaríamos ni siquiera probablemente discutiendo, sino cómo fue la transición ya en este punto, pero también los incentivos y la capacidad que tenemos incluso de alguna manera, por un lado de coerción, pero también de, como lo denominamos en el 2019, la ley de amnistía, es decir, cómo logras un acceso overall, sí, sería la palabra en inglés, pero vamos a incluso analizar en detalle lo que fue el 30 de abril y qué faltó. Más allá de puesta de acuerdo o no con la acción. Pero si lo ves, fue una conversación, para decirlo de manera lo más clean posible, con un sector fundamental de la sociedad para lograr una transición a la democracia. Y la gran pregunta no es, pues pudiste haber estado de acuerdo o no, y eso es válido, sino es que faltó para lograr esa transición con la perspectiva, insisto, de la Fuerza Armada.
This was just a very small preview of what you can expect in their study groups. The ambassador teaches on Monday afternoons, right? The president, Wednesday afternoons. The ambassador, Tuesday afternoons at 1 o'clock in a few minutes, her first class. And the president on Thursday afternoons. You can sign up by going to freedom.fiu.edu, students, and you can sign up. They're still open because we're just doing this event now, but I'm sure they're going to be filled up pretty soon, so sign up for them. Again, just a very small preview of what you can expect from these amazing public servants over the next 2 months. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for welcoming them, and have fun. Thanks.